Welcome back to Killer Stories. I'm your host, Bobby Holmes. I hope you all had a great Thanksgiving. I know I enjoyed my trip back to Pennsylvania to visit my family. It's nice to reflect on things that you're grateful for in life. And now starts the Christmas countdown, am I right? Who am I kidding? We had our Christmas tree up the day after Halloween. Before we jump into this week's story, I wanted to take a moment and read a message sent in by listener Angela Incata. She said, "I have to tell you, these stories are so fascinating." Skull emoji. "It's so crazy to wrap your mind around the mindset of a killer. I love that you do the research that it takes to produce these stories. I'm not going to lie, I Google every last one of them in pure fascination so I can see the face that matches these killer stories. I have shared your podcast with some of my friends that are already hooked on crime stories, so hopefully you have some new listeners soon." Black heart emoji. Which, by the way, is the best compliment you could give, sharing my show with your true crime-loving friends. Thank you so much, Angela. If you watch on YouTube, my more recent videos will have pictures of those involved in each story. This week's case was suggested by another listener, Victoria Shura. She wanted me to cover the recent triple homicide committed by 18-year-old Mauricio Johnson. But I swear the pictures they're showing of this kid, he looks like he's 12. This horrific crime took place in Northern California on the Rohnerville Rancheria Reservation. These families who live on the reservation are indigenous Native Americans. Within the reservation, people are governed by a tribal council. There are 7 council members elected to serve a term of 4 years. To give you an idea of the population, the Bear River Band tribe currently has 619 members. The mission statement for the tribe is to construct a method of healing that honors our ancestors, traditions, and values by establishing a justice system that creates positive change with accountability for spiritual and cultural wellness. The tribal court is here to empower all people to achieve and maintain balance and resiliency with respect and trust. In the early hours of February 10th, 2021, tribe member Margaret Moon caught her daughter Shelly drinking with a group of friends, most of which were her cousins. Let's face it, as a teenager in a somewhat remote area, there isn't much else to do for fun. I can relate, growing up in a small town, a lack of entertainment can lead to poor choices. Despite the underage drinking, Shelly was a well-behaved 16-year-old. She's described by others as being kind with a giving heart, just like her mother, Margaret. She volunteered at school, staying late to tutor other kids, so obviously super smart as well. It was around 3:30 a.m. when Margaret discovered that the group of teens were drinking. She was very upset with them and reportedly smashed a liquor bottle in the hallway. Considering they were all underage, she did the responsible thing and called their parents, putting an abrupt end to their partying. Everyone went back to their respective homes except for Mauricio Johnson. Shelly took him upstairs to her bedroom. She and Mauricio were pretty lit by this point, and you can probably guess where I'm going with this, 2 drunk teenagers alone in a bedroom. The 2 thought they were being quiet and sneaky, but while having sex, Shelly's bedroom door flung open. It was her soon-to-be stepfather, Nicky Melcalf. Walking in on your teenage daughter in bed with an older boy after you already broke up the party would be pretty upsetting. Mauricio was lying on top of Shelly, and Nicky flew off the handle. He ran into the room and threw a punch at Mauricio. I once was a teenage girl, and I know how my dad would react in this situation, and it wouldn't be pretty. You'd think that Mauricio would be happy that he made it out in one piece and run for the hills. But he was full of piss and vinegar. Super weird saying that I heard so often growing up. I wrote it in my script, and then I thought to myself, I'm probably the only one who talks like this. My husband tells me I have all these weird sayings he's never even heard before. I wondered if it was Pittsburghese or something, but I Googled it and the phrase traces way back to the 1930s. Anyways, it means someone is full of energy, rambunctious, but not in a positive way. In this instance, Mauricio is a pissed-off, drunk teenager. With his pants still down, he scrambled down the stairs to his backpack where he grabbed a 9mm, turned around, and shot Nikki Melcalf in the head. Margaret heard a pop and came running. She looked down at her fiancé on the floor and back up at Mauricio, who was now pointing the gun at her. He fired a second shot, hitting Margaret in the head. Then he turned to his girlfriend, 16-year-old Shelly, and shot her too. These deaths were so unnecessary. Even if Mauricio can justify killing Nikki because he hit him, why Margaret? And why on earth did he feel the need to kill his own girlfriend in this scenario? It makes no sense. Mauricio jumped in his car and drove to his brother's house. His brother and his girlfriend were still sleeping, but jolted awake at the sound of Mauricio pounding on the door. His brother opened the door to see Mauricio standing there, visibly shaken, covered in blood spatter, and holding a pistol. Once inside, he said, quote, "I did something. I wasn't thinking." He confessed to shooting someone. What he didn't say is that he actually shot 3 people, one of which being his girlfriend. Mauricio took off his bloody clothes and placed them in a plastic bag. Then he left again, taking the murder weapon and the bag of clothes with him. His next stop was Mom's house. He is still a child, after all. Mauricio's mother, Melissa Johnson, and her boyfriend, Von Eric Keener, were quick to help him get out of this mess he's created. They jump in her car and flee California. Only a few hours had passed since the murders, and the sun was starting to rise. One of Shelly's sisters came home and found 3 of her family members lying on the floor with gunshot wounds. She dialed 911. Shelly Moon and Nikki Metcalf were pronounced dead at the scene, but Margaret still had a pulse. She was rushed to the hospital. The shot to her head wasn't instantly fatal, but she was unfortunately brain dead. Margaret was in a critical condition that she couldn't overcome and died later that day. Word spread fast, and the police questioned the teenagers drinking at the Moon residence that night. Shelly's cousins named everyone, and by a simple process of elimination, Mauricio became the prime suspect. That evening, the Humboldt County Sheriff's Department broadcast a BOLO. I can't say I've heard that acronym before. I think it could be BOLO, but I can't help but say BOLO because YOLO is seared into my brain. Anyways, it stands for Be on the Lookout. They flashed a picture of Mauricio Johnson and said that he's thought to be traveling with his mother and her boyfriend. They were driving in Melissa's vehicle. She bought her Toyota Highlander at a discount car dealer. The dealer places tracking devices on all the cars that he sells so that if and when people don't pay their bills, he can have the vehicle repossessed. That doesn't sound legal to me. Well, regardless, this technology was able to help police follow their trail. The BOLO stated, quote, "Suspects are currently pinging in the Auburn, California area en route to Indiana via I-80. The vehicle is a white 2008 Highlander." A traffic stop was posted in the area where they thought to be traveling. Realizing they were screwed, the Highlander blew through the stop. Road spikes were placed across the highway near mile marker 74, which finally put an end to the chase. Inside the SUV was Mauricio Johnson and Von Eric Keener. Melissa Johnson was following behind in another car and had pulled over at the traffic stop. They were communicating with a 2-way radio and listening over scanners to try and evade law enforcement. All 3 were taken into custody in Tooele County, Utah, about 2 hours from where I live. This means they drove about 14 hours from the reservation before being found. Honestly, I think the police forces who worked together on this case deserve a round of applause. Pretty quick detainment compared to most cases. Not only the police and investigators, but those who came forward with the information to help narrow down their suspects and start their search. Melissa was released, but can expect to be charged with aiding and abetting. Von Erich Keener will face the same charges, but was held longer due to violating his parole. By the sound of it, Mauricio probably had a less fortunate home life. His role models are Melissa, whose SUV had a tracking device due to possible repossession, and Von Erich, who is on parole for God knows what. I can't say too much about them or their influence on Mauricio because there's limited information about this case. It's still so recent. Maybe someone is whipping up his Murderpedia profile as we speak, and I'll have more information to work on at a later date. Poor upbringing or not, there are no excuses for committing these senseless murders. During Mauricio's questioning, police asked him why. Why did he kill his girlfriend? He said that after he shot Nikki, he had to shoot Margaret and Shelly because they were witnesses. Apparently, in his crazy brain, shooting 2 more would help cover up the one. But there were many others who knew he was there that night. Obviously, he wasn't too confident because he fled the state. It's not like this was a methodical, planned killing. This was spur of the moment, an irrational act. I know as a mother you have an instinct to protect your child, but perhaps you draw the line when he stumbles in your house at 4:30 a.m. and tells you he shot 3 people in the head for no reason at all. Because a grown-up caught you in bed with your girlfriend? It happens to the best of us, dude. All you had to do was keep walking with your tail between your legs and go home. On October 26th, 2021, Mauricio Johnson pled guilty to 3 counts of first-degree murder. The DA accepted his confession and decided not to go to trial. Quote, "A trial would require testimony from young people who have suffered a tragedy." Skipping over a trial and straight to sentencing, Mauricio is to serve 150 consecutive years in prison. According to California law, a, quote, youthful offender will get the chance for parole after 25 years, no matter the crime, with the exception being life sentences without possibility of parole. What is considered youthful, you might ask? I thought the same thing myself. I mean, Mauricio is 18. At this age, especially with the extent of his crimes, he should be treated as an adult. Well, in 2018, a bill was passed extending the age of youthful offenders to 26. So I guess if you were over the age of 26, then you are treated as an adult. So as of now, Mauricio Johnson was extradited from Utah back to California and is serving his sentence of 150 years. He will be up for parole in 25. His mother's boyfriend, Von Erich Keener, was given an ankle bracelet and put on house arrest. In March of this year, he managed to cut off his monitor and escaped. His disappearance caused police to dig further into his rap sheet and discovered that he had 2 counts of sexual offenses that he failed to register. And I didn't realize it was the job of the offender to register themselves. I figured once arrested for a sexual crime, your name automatically makes the list. Anyways, when Keener was finally found, he was brought back to Humboldt County to serve 180 days in prison. Another topic linked to this case is the rising number of Indigenous women being murdered. According to Wikipedia, everyone's favorite source. I say that with sarcasm because other podcasters rag on it because it can be edited by anyone at any time. But they do list their sources, and I find it handy. Quote, Indigenous women have been frequent targets for hatred and violence. Underlying factors such as poverty and homelessness contribute to their victimization, as do historical factors such as racism, sexism, and the legacy of imperialism. End quote. The U.S. Department of Justice reports the murder rate for Native American women is 10 times the national average. 1 in 3 Indigenous women will experience sexual assault in their lifetime. The vast majority of the assaults are committed by other races. The year before the murders, Shelly's younger sister and her basketball team were raising awareness for MMIWG, Murdered and Missing Indigenous Women and Girls. During their games, the girls would paint red handprints across their mouths to represent the violence. They also wrote the names of missing women on their arms and legs. Little did she know that her own mother and sister would become victims. This case makes me so sad. In the blink of an eye, without even thinking, Mauricio Johnson took the lives of 3 innocent people. Choose your company wisely. It's scary to think what people around you are capable of. Thanks again to Victoria Shura for suggesting this case. If you have a hometown murder you would like me to cover, send an email to killerstoriespodcast@gmail.com. I do check my DMs and Facebook messages, but occasionally things get missed. As I mentioned earlier, I now video my recordings and have them available on YouTube. You can find the link for that and all my social media on my link tree in the show notes. Facebook, Instagram, and TikTok at Killer Stories Podcast, and I'm on Twitter at Killer Stories PC. If you listen on Apple Podcasts, I would greatly appreciate if you would leave me a review. I plan to read out reviews and give a shout out to those that do. As always, thanks for listening. Until next time, this has been a killer story.